Christmas Minion sculpture, and this is a polymer clay tutorial, but for this this is the part 2, and so for this one I'm going to be showing you how I did the painting, how I added their hair, and all of that good stuff that is not the actual sculpting, and how I put them together and all of those other fun things that are so important to this design. And so there are 6 minions total. I was thinking about the 5 wearing blue. So there's 6 of them total, each of them are different, and so I'm only going to be showing you painting of like a sampling so that you can get the idea, but there's too many to actually show each bit. So I'm going to begin with painting their eyes white, and then I'm going to start and take bright yellow and paint all of their skin. When you're painting something like this, it's important to remember to start with the thing farthest in and then work your way outward, and since their skin and what they're wearing is all on top of, or everything they're wearing is pretty much on top of their skin, it's a really good place to start with the background there, all of their yellow. The only thing that is, where this is a little switched, is that some of their arms are resting on top of their clothes, and that does kind of mess it up, but for the most part it works out pretty well, and it's never going to be a perfect system, so you just have to do it and make it as easy for you as possible, which hopefully this is. And yep, so painting all of them yellow, they all get their yellow skin. The only difference mostly is the Christmas Minion. He's got some different coloring because he's got red overalls instead of blue. So now I'm going to be painting all 5 of their overalls blue, and when I was doing this I did it in sort of an assembly line method. So I did first all of the yellow on them, and then I did all of the blue on them, and then I went through and just did them that way. That's a lot quicker, plus it allows for some dry time, so you don't have to worry about accidentally touching the blue and getting it on the yellow and all of those little situations that you just kind of want to avoid. And so I'm painting all of their pants, and I will be adding more details to them later in like shading and details and all that to their overalls, but for now just a nice layer of blue is all that's needed. And if you do want to, you can, for the most part I was using a nice filbert brush to do this, like I don't know what size it is, it doesn't actually have a size, it was a relatively inexpensive brush, but probably like a 2. But then I'm going to go through with a 00 and just fill in all of the smaller areas that I couldn't get to with that larger one. And this is a round brush. And then I'll paint their shoes black, and all of them have black shoes. And so I'm just going to be painting those. Once again, going back to that nice filbert brush that I had never used before, but I actually really enjoy. It's a size I don't usually go for, so it was nice to switch it up a little bit. And then I'm going to be painting their gloves black. And with the black, I'm not going to do any highlighting or anything on that. Later on, I did glaze them so they have some shine. I figured that way it would pick up all the high and low points of the clay and just let the clay work for itself. And for whatever reason, I missed painting his goggles silver, but I did. And then with diluted, and it's kind of like a gray blue, I went through and I did some shadowing on his overalls, and then I'm going to be shadowing the Minion himself with orange. The reason I used orange instead of shadowing him with a darker shade of yellow is because I wanted the shadows to not actually look dingy. I wanted to keep them really bright, which the orange will do. And then they have varying colors of pupils. I did all sorts of them, so some of them blue, some of them brown, and what have you. For this guy who has the blue eye, I highlighted that with just white. So then I'm going to be adding all the details to their overalls. So I'm going to start with painting Gru's logo on the pocket, and then adding stitching to everything with dashed black lines. And when I did this, I looked at where they had stitching on some photos that I found on the internet of Minions, and so that really helped out because you want to make sure that you put the stitches in the right locations. So around the pockets, down the sides, and then a little bit around the bottom on the front and the back, around the overall straps. And this is a lot of dashed black lines. This part was probably the most time-consuming step in the painting process. Not the most time-consuming step in general, but definitely for painting. And then also adding his pupil, a couple little white highlights, and then just some diluted black shadows around the eyeball itself. So then, as I mentioned, I'm going to be glazing the goggle strap, his hands, or gloves I guess, the buttons, and his feet, or his shoes. And I didn't have to paint the bottom of this guy's shoes because you don't see that. So then for the goggles, I painted a layer of what's called gel sealer, that's a nail product, on them. That's going to protect them from the acrylic, which is going to be the next step. So you paint that on, and then you cure it in a light, and then I filled them in with acrylic. Now if you don't use nail products, which is perfectly acceptable, you can fill that with liquid clay and then cook it again. So now I'm going to be painting my Santa Minion, And so I'm going to be painting him with red, as I mentioned, instead of blue for his overalls and his hat. So same basic steps. Everything is pretty much the same, just a different color. And I'm going to be painting him. And because he is holding that naughty or nice list, you do have to be careful and paint underneath that, which does provide a little bit of a tricky situation. And making sure not to get any of that red paint on the yellow, because it would definitely stain. And then going up and over his straps, just like that. And then I did go through with that smaller brush and fix up any of those other lines. And also I'm going to be painting in his Santa hat with some more of that red. Just like that. And then with white, I'm going to be painting over his naughty list. It's not a naughty or nice list. It's just a naughty list. He knows that none of these minions that he's supervising are doing what they're supposed to, so why even bother writing nice on there? So then, as I mentioned, I'm going to be making his naughty list say naughty on it. Underline that, and then make your list of who you think is. And I went with the specific minions that you see all the time. So Bob, and as much of Stuart as I could write, Kevin, and then the last one I did was just Jim. I don't know if there is a minion named Jim, but I figured there probably is, so I put that on there. And then with gray, I'm going to be painting his goggles. You can use gray or silver, or you can use a combination of gray and silver if your silver isn't very opaque. So I just started out with a light gray to paint the goggles. Just like that, and paint the inside and the outside, pretty much everything, being careful not to get any of that gray in places that you don't want it, like his eyelid or his eyeball, which is a little tricky on the inside there a little bit. And then I painted gold over his buttons, and I actually did that for all of them. I skipped that part telling you about it for whatever reason on the other ones. And then I also am going to be painting the little trim on his hat, so the fur that goes around his head, and then also at the top of it, just like that. And then I'm going to be making this one with green eyes, and I did that because I thought the green would contrast really, really well with the red of his suit. So now for this guy who has his tongue sticking out, I'm going to paint the inside of his mouth first with just a really dark burgundy, and I'm going to blend that down in his tongue in a moment as well. But then I'll paint his tongue light pink, making sure I get in all over there, and the entire tongue does end up being pink, which sometimes you have to really turn these guys upside down and do what you gotta do to get all the little bits painted. And then I'm going to be adding a little bit of his teeth with some white, and I did that quick, but I also added the little shadowing with the burgundy on his tongue. And then for the candy cane that he is tasting, I'm going to paint half the stripes with white, and then I'll go through and paint half of them with red, just like you would for a candy cane. And this is another place where I kind of turned them upside down and all over the place to make sure I could get paint wherever paint was needed. And this guy, so when I was doing this, I really tried to personify each one and imagine, like, if, I don't know who would be doing this in my house, but if I had a group of, like, all of my nephews, I've got oodles of nephews, if I had them all together and I was trying to get them to decorate, it would be so difficult. They'd all be off on their own things, tearing open presents, eating stuff. It'd be just like this. And for the one holding the star, I painted that gold. And so now to add their hair, I took a stick pin and I am just poking out all those little holes that are in their head, just because they might have gotten paint in them or dust or debris. I'm just making sure they're all nice and open and really clear, and it'll be easy to add their hair in. And you can also add some more holes in their head if you want to. With the pin, doing it slowly and carefully, poking that into the cooked clay, it does work. Just be cautious of it and do it nice and slow and steady, and like I said, cautiously. I'm going to say that twice, just because if you are a little too reckless with it, you might crack your clay and then a chunk of his head might just come off, which would be bad. So then to add his hair, as I've started doing and just talking right over it, you take a piece of thread. I'm using upholstery thread, which is nice and thick, and it's a heavier thread, and I dipped the end of it into some super glue. And then I'm going to put that into the holes that you have. And if it doesn't seem like it's going in, just take your safety pin and sort of press into the thread to really get it in there. And hopefully your thread will just sort of stand up on its own and it'll work really well. That was pretty much what I found with it. Now, if you're using a lighter weight thread and it doesn't have quite the stiffness as this one does, it might not work as well. But once you trim it off, since his hair is far longer than I actually need it to be in the end, which I'm trimming it now, it should hopefully perk back up and stand up and have a nice crazy hairdo. And so I gave them all different types of haircuts, mohawks, parted down the center. I just split it up a little bit and had fun with it. And so now I'm going to be painting my box. And so I did the background of it all with this really nice dark burgundy, same color that I painted inside the one minion's mouth. And so I'm just going to be filling that in, painting it, painting it, painting it. And then I'm going to be painting the top of the box with the same color. And I'm usually pretty good about not getting paint on anything or myself. This box was a different story. I was so covered in paint by the end of this that it was hilarious, actually. My hands were multiple colors. So then I'm going to be painting the ribbon that goes around my little gift box green. And my original thought to do this was I was going to sculpt out a little gift to put inside there, but then I decided you wouldn't see it. That was what the banana was originally for, and then I thought it would just be better to have that separate, which is why I set it under the tree instead. It doesn't really matter where you put it. I don't know. I thought it'd be kind of a waste to put it inside the box. So now to paint the banana, I'm going to start by just covering it up with yellow. And that's the same thing for the banana ornaments. I'm just going to be painting them yellow, and this is the same yellow that I painted my minions. And then I'm going to be painting the ribbon, that same dark red that I've been using all along, which is not very opaque. So it took about, I don't know, it felt like 16 coats to get that nice and full coverage. It was only 3 though. It seemed like it took way farther than it needed to. And then I'm going to be painting the rest of that, just like that, going around it. Nice little ribbon. And if you wanted to, if you don't like to do all this painting, you could use colored clay, colored polymer clay to use this, to do it instead, using yellow clay for the banana, so on. I always get cat hair or dust or color. It's a mess whenever I try to use color clay, so generally speaking, I don't. But you can if that is your preferred method. So now I'm going to be painting the base of my minions a nice pearly white. And so I actually started out with just a white layer of paint underneath it to make sure that it covered really nicely, but then I added a really pearly color on top of it just to sort of give the base movement, so it wasn't just white. I wanted to have a little extra something, so I thought that pearl was really nice. I didn't want it to be too busy though either, because there's a lot going on here. I didn't want the base to distract from it. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to be assembling my minion stack. So I'm going to put glue on the top of the stick for the one that's on the top, and then also underneath his foot. So everything needs to be glued together really, really well. That way, once it's all put together, it's not going to fall apart either. And that one, let that dry fully before you attach it to your base so that it's not going to come apart. And then I'm going to be gluing him to the base and gluing everything together. And the glue that I'm using is called Liquid Nails. Not a nail product, it's nails, like nails for a wall. And so it's really heavy duty, it is really thick, and it dries relatively quickly. So it says 5 minutes on there. So you have to wait too long for things to dry, but it's so strong and it's so thick, and I mean strong, not like strong smelling, but strong as in it holds things well, that you don't have to really be afraid after it's dried of things breaking or coming apart, which is a huge relief. And so that's a product that I found in a junk drawer in my house, and then I'm like, okay, I'll give this a go, I'll see how this works, and it is my favorite glue. It is amazing, and it doesn't really have much of a smell either, which is nice. So then inside the box, I just folded up a piece of tissue paper and shoved that inside, put some more of that liquid nails around the lid, set that down, glued that into place, and then I'm going to be wrapping a string of lights around my Christmas tree, and the string of lights that I'm using are made out of acrylic, and I will put a link at the end of the video to a video on my nail channel that shows how I made the lights. So then I have 2 strings, and I just wrap them together so that they become one, and then I'm wrapping up this one minion up in the lights, and he's so sad. I don't know if you can see that little tear. He's so sad he's wrapped up in lights. He failed his one job. So then I'm going to be adding all of the ornaments onto my tree, and so and they have a little wire hanger on them, so I just got some of that liquid nails glue onto there, and then I was able to just hang them on the tree, and once that glue dries, you're not going to get them to come off either. So once they dry, they're really nice in place, and you can move it around without fear of the ornaments falling off, which is really nice. And so I'm just going to add them to the tree here and there and all around. And I split them up from side to side, so I had equal numbers to go on each side of the tree. And so now I also have some little ornaments, not ornaments, but antlers. And I'm going to glue one antler to the one side of his head, and then the other antler to the other side of the one that's sneaking into the gift. And I'm gluing his Rudolph nose to his face. And I also set something underneath each of the horns and let that dry for a while before I took that out, just to prop them up so that they wouldn't fall off. And then with super glue, I glued a string wrapping around his head underneath each side of the Rudolph nose, just so it looked like it wasn't randomly stuck to his face, but it was being held on by a string. Just like that, and that is everything. That is all done. This completed sculpture took me approximately 6 days, working really nice long days to Each Minion, the details like the overalls and the goggles, took me an hour and a half to 2 hours to sculpt, and that's not including things like painting them, adding hair, and doing the original sculpt with just the aluminum foil and the first layer of clay. So this was a very time-consuming project, so I hope you appreciate it. I know that for my family it's something that we absolutely love because we're Minion fanatics. And don't forget to check out my Facebook and Instagram to see better pictures of them, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!